election that precinct delegates are going to be voting on is Attorney General. And we have Tom Leonard here tonight. Speaker Tom Leonard, thank you so much for coming, Tom. You're coming up right now, so put down the coffee.
You got it. I got to have a cup.
Where are you coming from?
We are coming from Bay City. We started the day in Carroll with a group of prosecutors. We went up to Bay City to address the Sheriff's Association, and now we're closing it out with the grassroots. This is awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, good evening, and thank you all so much for having me. It seems like it was just a couple weeks ago that we were here, but I know it's been several months. But my goodness, Marion, Michonne, Roseanne, and I don't think Diane's not here, is she? Okay. I've never seen four harder workers than those four ladies. Can they pack a room or what? So thank you for all that you do. But yes, Tom Leonard, current Speaker of the House, running for Attorney General. And let me get right into this. And I'm going to get into my background in just a moment. But first and foremost, let me say this, and I try to begin every speech with this. It truly has been an absolute incredible honor and blessing to serve as Speaker of the House, and truly something I thank the Lord for day in and day out. And much of that is because of the awesome issues we get to work on, but most importantly, the awesome people we get to work with every day. And many of you are right here in this room. So thank you for everything you do day in and day out. Now, Stan was talking about how important the Secretary of State's election is. And I want to say this, is Stan still here? If there is one person that I trust to do what he says he's going to do, protect that ballot, make certain that there's not fraud, make certain that dead people don't vote, it's Stan Grote. And Stan will make an incredible Secretary of State. But when you look at this Attorney General's race, has anybody heard the name Dana Nessel?
Yes.
You need to get to know that name. When we leave here tonight, I don't want anybody to forget that name when you leave. Dana Nessel is who the Democrats put up as their nominee for Attorney General. Let me tell you a little bit about Dana Nessel. First, she said her number one priority, if she's elected the state's next Attorney General, number one, is to wage absolute war with our President Donald Trump and his agenda. This is somebody, and I'm not just giving you political talking points when I say this. She is further left than Bernie Sanders. And she's proud of it. She has openly said she, as the state's next Attorney General, will determine which laws she will uphold. In fact, we are working on welfare reform right now that would simply say if you are going to receive Medicaid, you've either got to work 80 hours a month, or you got to go to school, or you got to learn a trade. Dana Nessel has already said if she's elected the state's next Attorney General, she's already called me out on this on Facebook for pushing this. She has said she will not uphold that law if and when it passes. But let me share something with you, and it's going to take me just a second to bring this up. Who remembers our conservative icon, Phyllis Schlafly? When Phyllis Schlafly passed away 2 years ago, this is what Dana Nessel, the Democrat nominee for Attorney General, this is what she posted on her Facebook about Phyllis Schlafly. I'm reading this word for word. This woman destroyed the lives of so many. They say we should not speak ill of the dead, but the best thing I have ever been able to say about her is that she now is. If you don't think that that's somebody that's serious when they say they're going to wage war with our president, she is. And that's scary, and I don't want you to forget that name when you leave here tonight. Now, how are we going to beat Dana Nessel in the fall?
By electing Tom Leonard.
Absolutely. We will defeat her, but I will tell you this. We're going to beat her based on qualifications, and I'm going to get into those in just a second. Second, we are going to beat her with somebody that is not afraid to take on tough issues, and I'm going to get into those. But third, and let me be very frank, and I brought this up at our our Republican debate a few weeks ago. We will not beat Dana Nessel by running to the center. This is somebody that if we are going to beat, we've got to stay true to our convictions, we got to stay true to our principles, and we got to beat her from the right. Now, qualifications. I am the only Republican candidate in this race right now that's running that has prosecution experience. I was a prosecutor for 3 years in Genesee County. I was assigned to Flint, where I was a drug prosecutor for about half of that. I've been in the courtroom with the officers. I've put bad guys behind jail or behind bars. But most importantly, I went out on the streets with the officers. I wanted them to know that if they were going to have my back inside the courtroom, I was going to have their back on the streets. After leaving the prosecutor's office, I worked for the Attorney General for a couple years. And I've been told, my understanding is that when I'm elected the state's next Attorney General, it'll be the first time in our state's history that we actually elected somebody that actually worked inside the office. I'm ready to hit the ground running day one. Second, we need somebody that is going to be willing to stand up and fight for our principles and fight for our values. If any of you remember, do you remember what the first bill was that we pushed and we worked on in the House? House Bill 4001? It was a bill that was going to restore the broken promise of that income tax hike that Jennifer Granholm and unfortunately many Republicans forced upon us several years ago. It was going to restore that promise back to 3.9 because right now the income tax is at 4.25. Many have asked me, what has been the most surprising thing that you have seen or experienced as Speaker of the House? And I've told them, I never knew how difficult it was going to be to get some Republicans to actually want to cut your taxes.
Dirty dozen.
When we brought this bill up, or we brought it to the House floor, truly, I thought this was going to be something we'd have about an hour or so of debate. I figured the Democrats would stand up there and tell us how the world was coming to an end because we were going to make government live with less. And unfortunately, we had to spend 8 or 9 hours trying to get Republicans to vote to reduce the income tax. And not only any Republican, but Republicans whose campaign websites we went on. And they made campaign promises. Part of their platform was, when I get to Lansing, I'm going to restore the promise, or I'm going to fight for lower taxes. And around midnight, we realized real quickly we were going to be 3 votes. Well, I knew at least 3 and maybe 2 votes short getting this thing passed. And I pulled my inner circle team back. I pulled my leadership team back, and I said, guys, I got to tell you. And typically what would happen in Lansing is if the Speaker doesn't have enough votes, they pack up and they go home for the night. And then what happens is all those people that had whipped no or weren't going to vote for it, they're never on the record. They're never held accountable. But most importantly, all the reps that wanted to do the right thing, they're silenced and they don't have a voice because they don't have the ability to vote yes. So I told my leadership team, I said, guys, I think we have to put this up tonight. We've got to put everybody on the record. And they totally agreed. I brought my press secretary in and I said, Gideon, I want you to paint the Armageddon scenario. What's going to happen to me tonight when and if I put this up and I record it? And he said, well, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you this. He said, it's going to be the first time in nearly 20 years a speaker's actually done this. I said, okay. And he said, the Lansing Lobby Corps is going to think you're absolutely crazy. I said, okay. He said, the media is going to beat you up for about a week. I said, okay. And he said, and on Sunday, I'll guarantee you the Detroit Free Press is going to write a very nasty editorial about you. I said, okay. He said, but I can tell you this. He said, nobody, I don't want to say nobody, all the pundits were saying we never could carry our state for our president. He said they were saying that we were going to lose majority in the House. And he said, I'll tell you this, for the first time in nearly 30 years, we carried the state for our president. And we went in with a 63-seat majority, and we came out with a 63-seat majority. And it wasn't because of the Lansing Lobby Corps. It wasn't because of the media. And it certainly wasn't because of the Detroit Free Press. Right. He said, I will tell you this. The folks that are responsible for putting you here and responsible for carrying our state by 10,000 votes for our president, the ones that actually made the phone calls, hit the doors, stuck those envelopes, they are going to be excited about the fact there's finally a caucus in town willing to stand up and fight for them. Amen. And that's what we did. I'm I'm not afraid to take on those fights. And you know what? Everything came true. That editorial came through that said Tom Leonard's a weak leader. He doesn't know how to count. All those media accounts, the Lansing Lobby Corps said, what in the world is he doing? But I tell you what, we held folks accountable that night. And that's what I will do as the state's next Attorney General. Now, when you look at conservative values and how we've got to beat Dana Nessel from the right, when you look at my record, the American Conservative Union just released their 2017 rankings, and I was tied as the most conservative legislator in Lansing with 95% out of 100. When you look at the major issues that are near and dear to our heart, you can look this up. In fact, all you've got to do is look at the 50-minute debate or the hour-long debate, and most all this stuff, you're going to see it. I am the only candidate that has never changed my position on Common Core state standards. I have opposed them from day one. I have never faltered. I've never wavered on them. When it came to the internet tax, I opposed it, and my opponent did not. When it came to making English the official language of the state of Michigan, and you can look at the debate, you can watch this, go and YouTube it. I've never faltered on the fact and the idea that English should be the official language of the state of Michigan. My opponent, as a House member, was one of 2 Republicans that voted against that. And then just in the last year, when she decided to run for Attorney General, she decided to support it. And anybody that was at the debate can attest to this. She then gave some convoluted answer that the reason she opposed it 10 years ago or 12 years ago or whatever it was is because she wanted 2 languages to be printed on all government documents. What is the purpose of making English the official language of the state of Michigan? When it comes to religious liberty, and folks, this is very serious, and that's why I'm not trying to be negative towards her, but I believe you need to understand the issues before us and the difference between the 2 candidates. When it comes to religious liberty, back in 2014, the House pushed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I voted for it. I'm on record saying I support religious liberty in the state of Michigan. When the media asked her what her position was on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, her response was, and you can look this up, it's all documented, her response was, we don't need to be the poster child like Indiana. So not only did she essentially say she opposed it, but she threw our now Vice President, then Governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, completely under the bus. Civil asset forfeiture reform. These are very big issues. Again, anybody that was at that debate, they saw this, they heard this. The question was, what is your position on civil asset forfeiture reform? My opponent went first and gave some convoluted answer about how she had to study 3 or 4 bills before she could make a decision. I was very clear and in about 10 seconds said, under no circumstance whatsoever should the government take your property without a conviction. Very clear on that issue. So again, when you look at the candidates before us for this Republican nomination, look at the one that has the experience to win in November. Look at the one that has not been afraid to tackle the tough issues. But most importantly, remember the candidate that's not afraid to take on and fight the Democrat nominee from the right. Because that's what we have to do to win. How many times did we hear cycle after cycle after cycle that a Republican nominee had to moderate themselves to win in a purple state like Michigan? And finally, after 30 years, we put up a candidate that was willing to stand true to our values, true to our convictions, and not afraid to stand firm on our conservative principles. And look what happened. Yep. If we do that, we can be just as successful in 2018. Yep. Thank you all so much for having me. Again, it's an incredible honor to be here. You want to take Okay, yep, I didn't know if I was supposed to take questions or not, so.
Right here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll come over here next, okay?
We've listened to several of your issues regarding tax reduction. How do you explain your position on House Bill 5325?
Which one, I'm sorry, which one's
That's the
53?
special assessment tax.
Yeah, so the question was, how do I explain my position on 5325? Let me be very, very straight with you, okay? In the legislature, we've probably taken myself, since I've been there, a little over 3,000 votes. This is one that I looked at. My understanding when I looked at it was that it was one to close a loophole. It was a bad vote. I'll be very, very frank with you. There was, hang on.
Takes the power of taxation and turns it over to a non-elected authority.
I understand that. Just let me explain this, okay? There was zero opposition to the bill. We looked at it. Nobody had opposed it. Again, when I looked at it, to me, it was closing a loophole. When Michonne, when they brought this to my attention, I went back, I took a better look at it. And if it comes back to the House for concurrence, certainly I will be opposing it. But it was one of those, again, I've cast 2,500 to 3,000 votes, and it's one of those that I wish I could have back. I can't unless it comes back for
I would urge you to
concurrence.
Take a second look at it, and I think the next time you look at it, you should bear in mind that it probably flies contradictory to most municipal zoning ordinances. If you take a look at municipal zoning ordinance, you'll find that the preamble in most of them starts off with protection of residential property. This absolutely destroys that. This is contradictory to that. Please take another look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and I want to thank, seriously, Marianne and Michonne and many others in the room. I remember when Senate Bill 97 came over from the Senate several months ago. And they didn't hesitate to give me a call and say, hey, Tom, take a very good look at this one. They explained their side of it. I took a look and I said, you know what? I've taken a good look at this. That bill is never going to move. Right. Point being, again, this is one, I've cast 2,500 to 3,000 votes. There's a few. Okay.
I'd like to support you, but I'm having problems. Okay, help me out.
Okay. Well, as I said, when you look at the record of the two candidates, I don't think it's even close in terms of where we're at on the issues and who the most conservative candidate is. Yes, sir.
I spoke with you last September regarding the American Laws for American Courts Bill, which is 4499, introduced by Hatenga in April.
Yep.
And it's been stuck in Klesto's committee.
Yep.
I talked to you about having it moved to another committee, and you said you would look at that, and I wanted to know if you looked at that. And my understanding is that one of the reasons supposedly it wouldn't, you were concerned about it is because of a lawsuit, which I think is baloney. I don't know what they're going to sue on and why they're going to sue. But why hasn't that moved during this session while we're sure we have a Republican majority? We're not so sure we will next year. Why don't you get it out?
No, understandable. And, as I said, first let me say this. In terms of re-referring a bill, the committee chair has to re-refer that bill, okay? Second, let me be very clear, and I've always been very clear where I'm at on American laws and American courts. I 100% support that legislation. 100%. I've never wavered on my support of that. I have had several conversations with Representative Hoytinga, who, by the way, has endorsed my candidacy. And my understanding is that she is still working on the bill to get some of the language correct, so that when and if it passes, she will make certain that it passes constitutional muster.
That's been a year since she introduced it. She hasn't.
And my understanding is that she is still working on the bill.
Can you give her assistance? Can you expedite the process? Is there anything you can do as Speaker to expedite this? Because if we don't have respect for the American Constitution as the supreme law of the land, everything else is moot.
I completely agree.
So what can you do to assist to facilitate this and expedite it?
I have full trust in Michelle Hoytinga. She is one of the most conservative members. She is one of the most conservative members that we have. And my understanding is that she is still working on the bill to ensure that the language is done right.
Something is.
Can you address some of the things that are on the mailers that are coming out from China?
Yeah.
We're getting like 3 times a week.
Yeah, so The question was, can I address what some of the mailers that you have received? I find it interesting. Somebody sent me one today that said that she was a strong proponent of religious liberty. And again, I would just take you back to what she said about RFRA. When you look at the Second Amendment, I know that she's been sending out a lot of Second Amendment mailers. The National Association for Gun Rights, if you go to their website page right now, or their Facebook page, she has still yet to fill out their questionnaire. They have asked her at least 2 or 3 times to please fill out their questionnaire to let her know, or let them know where she stands on gun rights. In terms of, I know one of the big issues that we have, or that she has hit me on, is this quote unquote, I was giving all of this money to a liberal Democrat. As I mentioned, I was a prosecutor in Genesee County. My boss was a guy by the name of David Layton, one of the finest prosecutors in the state of Michigan. He was the former president of the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan. Somebody that a lot of the prosecutors around the state respect. When I was working with him, twice a year he had fundraisers. One was for a birthday fundraiser, and I can't remember what the other one was. Certainly the staff and I, we would go to show support. And as I said, David is one of the most respected prosecutors in the state of Michigan, probably one of those old school blue dog conservative Democrats, if you will. And one question I've asked, I was in a group, or I was at an event in her district, and I asked this question. David, as I said, is one of the most respected prosecutors in the entire state. She's running to be the top law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. And there is a lot going on right now in Flint with prosecutions, with the water crisis. I mean, the list goes on and on. And David has forged a very good relationship with our current Attorney General. And my question would be, how is somebody going to be successful day one if when they go in, all the prosecutors in the state know that they've done nothing for the past year but tear down one of the most respected prosecutors in the state? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with my record. I'm going to continue to show the difference between our records, but I'm not going to try to beat her by tearing somebody else down.